What's up, everybody? It's Megan here with the Financially Free Era podcast by SLP Wealth. This is our new channel. Thanks for joining us. We're still here on Friday, so I hope you're having a lovely end to your week. And today we're going to be chatting about the Retirement Starter Pack, 8 moves that you can make now to get on track for retirement. And this is inspired by my father-in-law's last day of work more recently, or coming up actually. We went and celebrated his retirement. He is retiring after almost 40 years of educating. He was a physical education teacher, a coach, his entire career. Literally did what he wanted for his entire career. Very admirable. And he put together a game plan to retire, to walk away and feel good about walking away from work. And that plan has been put into action literally right in front of my eyes this year, which is really, really exciting. So I want to really dive into how you yourself can make sure that you're on track for retirement. And you might be thinking like, man, that is a long time away from me, or a long time away from now for where I'm at in my life. And there are small steps that you can still make today that make a difference. So the saying is, when's the best time to plant a tree? Yesterday, but the next best time to start is today. So same thing with retirement planning, retirement savings. It is a longer term goal, right? It's something that we work towards over the life of our career. So the small things that we do today do actually add up and they make a difference. So let's jump in and talk about our checklist. So I've got 8 things to really get organized with. So number 1 would be to get clear on your timeline. When do you want to retire? What kind of timeline are we looking at? How old are you now? And are you someone who wants to retire in their 50s, in their 60s, in their 70s? Do you just love your work where you really can't see yourself retiring technically? Maybe financially retiring where you don't have to be earning income anymore, but you go into work because you absolutely love it. That's a really nice place to be in, right? But get clear on your timeline. What are we looking at there? And that's going to help us with some number crunching, right? Because we need to know how long do we have until we need our money that we're saving and investing and preparing for this time frame in the future. How long do we have before we have to start distributing from that and putting together a distribution strategy? So that's the first thing. Get clear on your timeline. Second thing, know your number. Or numbers, I should say. Know your numbers. What does this mean? How much are you going to need to retire comfortably? I think sometimes folks feel like there's just like one number in particular, like I need $1 million or I need $5 million to be able to retire. But I want you to I want you to kind of take a step back, right? Let's back into that number to understand how much do you actually spend today? What is your standard of living today? Maybe take out things that would go away in retirement, like maybe you won't have your student loans, you won't have certain debt payments, maybe your mortgage is paid off, or you have a different mortgage, maybe you've downsized, so a smaller mortgage. Think about the expenses that you have to have. So groceries, those things aren't going to go away in retirement. Still have to feed yourself, still have to pay utilities, right? Gas, electric, heat, those kind of things. Think about those things, add up kind of where our current standard of living is now, and compare that to maybe what you would like your standard of living to be. So if you're someone who's really actively trying to pay down debt right now, but normally you would be putting some of that money towards more vacation time, or it could also be just working less. So that's another thing. But think about the kind of life, the kind of spending that you would want to do in those retirement years. And a lot of times I'll have folks tell me that they think they're going to spend less in retirement. And I beg to differ, or I at least challenge you on that, because when every day is a Saturday, I think I've said this on a Financially Free Friday episode before, but when every day is a Friday, there's nothing stopping you from going out, having fun, and spending money, right? When every day is a Saturday or a weekend where we don't have obligations we have to like tend to for 8, 10 hours a day, which would be work normally. it's easier to spend money, especially if you want to do some fun stuff to enjoy, those retirement years. So you might be traveling more. Maybe you're spoiling grandkids. Maybe you're visiting family members. Maybe you're, finding a new hobby, and that's adding some expenses. So I wouldn't necessarily count on your expenses going down. I would plan on your expenses potentially staying about the same or even going up, maybe with healthcare expenses. Knowing your spending numbers can come from exercises like budgeting or using tools like Monarch Money or other financial planning tools that just track your spending. That can be a great exercise to do regardless, because I think cash flow and how you spend on a month to month basis is the lifeblood of your whole financial plan. It's really hard to know what we can do with your money to work towards your goals if we don't know where your money's going, right? I can tell you, yeah, let's put $1,000 extra towards retirement. But if we don't have that $1,000 in the cash flow, we're not, we're going to go into debt to be working towards a goal, which doesn't make sense. So know your cash flow numbers. That's really important. And then from there, what we do in a financial planning relationship is we start to use tools. Our tool that we use is called Right Capital. It's our long-term financial planning tool that we build out basically a scenario to show, okay, if we spend this much today and we think we're going to spend about the same in our future years in retirement, it's going to factor in our assets that we have today, our liabilities, when those liability payments stop, our assets growing over time based on their current allocation, and it's going to give us a probability of success. We put in like when we want to retire to, so the end date and how much we're saving over the course of the years. And it spits out a probability of success based on what's called a Monte Carlo analysis, which Monte Carlo simulation, what that is in financial planning is it's an assumption where basically it runs about 1,000 different random scenarios with up and down markets over time. And what this is going to answer is how probable is it that you can successfully retire with the numbers that we've plugged in with all these different scenarios. So market's doing awesome, the market doing horrible. What's the probability of success there? And that's going to tell us, how comfortable can we feel that what we're doing today is going to get us to a point where our money lasts us through retirement. We don't run out of money at 85, right? So I think that's a really helpful thing to walk through when we're really starting to drill down, like, are we on track for retirement? And this is something that you can do with a financial professional. This is something you can do with, there's, I'm sure, some tools online that might give you some basic numbers to spit out. There's also some basic rules of thumb. If you want just like a quick rule of thumb number, one example is 25 times expenses. That might be your number to start with. So take your expenses, your annual expenses, whatever that is, multiply it by 25 times. And that's the lump sum amount that you may need to live off of in retirement to not run out of money. That's a very simple calculation, right? Because it's not taking into account a lot of things that we would want to take into account, like market fluctuation, interest fluctuation, cost of living adjustments, those types of things. So that's just kind of a cautionary thing right there. So rules of thumb are great for like a quick number to know, like, are we way off track? Or are we close to being on track? That might be like a first step, and then getting into some of the more in-depth number crunching. But not something I would rely on for the full financial plan, I would say. All right. So we talked about getting clear on your timeline. That was number one. Number two is knowing your numbers, knowing how much we're going to need to retire comfortably, starting to bake those numbers into some calculations. And number three is going to be inventory of your accounts. So getting an inventory of your accounts. Where is our money right now? And what are we saving in? Why are we saving in those buckets? And what do we have? So you might have an employer account like a 401k or a 403b or TSP. You may have an IRA or a Roth IRA, an HSA, health savings account, or like a regular a regular investment account, like a brokerage account. There's lots of different accounts that you could be putting your money in, and it's helpful to have a picture. Maybe this is a good way to think about it, but think about your retirement savings. You need money in different buckets, and those different buckets are part of a three-legged stool. So that three-legged stool, one stool leg is pre-tax money. So that's money that you're going to put into like your 401k or something that is pre-tax. We take the tax deduction today. So we save on taxes, but what that means is in retirement, when we take the money out, we're going to have to pay taxes on that money, right? So pre-tax is one stool leg. Another stool leg is tax-free money. That would be where Roth would show up. So you could have money in a Roth 401k, Roth IRA, but that is money that we already got taxed on when we put the money in. Like money already went in, we didn't take a tax deduction. And that money that's in a Roth IRA or a Roth 401k is never going to be taxed again, which is very nice. So we already took the tax hit. So that's our post-tax bucket. Then we have our taxable bucket. That is where our brokerage account falls. Our brokerage account is an account that each year we are taxed on whatever happened within that account. So we don't get a tax deduction, and it's not tax free when we pull the money out, unless maybe there's some kind of wash with our gains and our losses or something. But generally, the taxable leg stool is something that is still important within our retirement planning, because the taxable account, that stool leg, is what we can access for earlier retirement. We can access this bucket at any time. There's no like time or age restrictions on just a brokerage account or a non-retirement investment account. So that's really helpful if you're someone who wants to retire in their 50s, because your 401k, your IRAs, you're not going to be able to take from those accounts without having some trouble with some penalties because we're too young. We're not 59 and a half years old, basically. So the brokerage account could be really helpful to help us get towards retirement sooner, being able to take money out of our accounts before we're 60, basically. And it's available at any point. So for some folks, it's where we're saving our tax bomb. It's where we're saving money for like a future home renovation or for our kids' college. So it's a bucket that's very universal, which is really nice. Now, the Roth IRA bucket, or the Roth bucket in general, this money is really helpful in our retirement plan because we're never going to be taxed on that money again. So that's great because we can decide in the future between the two stools, the pre-tax and the post-tax bucket, the traditional 401k and the Roth bucket, what kind of tax environment are we in? And what is our income? What is our income situation? What tax bracket would we be in if we pulled from one bucket or the other? And we can make decisions on which bucket to pull from in different tax environments, because the Roth bucket, we know we're not going to get taxed on. The pre-tax bucket, though, we are. So if we're taking from a 401k the same year that maybe we had some big capital gains because we sold our practice, or we still had like half a year of our regular salary, that might not be the best year to take money from a pre-tax account, because we're going to have to pay a lot of taxes potentially on what we're taking out. So what's great about these three different legs is that we have options at the end of the day. That's what we want. Tax diversification really matters in retirement to minimize how much we have to pay in taxes, one, but also that helps preserve our money as long as possible by just being smart about which buckets we're tapping into and when. So when we're talking about retirement planning with clients, we want to be building up all three of those buckets. We want those options. So that's what we're doing when we're taking inventory of your accounts. So I would be thinking about, okay, I'm contributing to my 401k. Should I be increasing that? Should I be looking at maximizing that? And actually, I'm kind of cheating and going ahead, but the fourth step on here is maxing out the right buckets while they're open. So let's talk through that. We have maximum amounts that we can put into these different retirement specific accounts. So Roth IRA or IRA, for example, right now we can only put $7,000 per person into a Roth IRA, or an IRA per year. That's it. So if we don't contribute to that this year, we can't go back and contribute to last year's bucket. That door is closed. And so we've missed out on maybe 1 year where we could have put money in a post-tax situation where we've got money that's never going to be taxed again. So we've, kind of closed that door, missed that opportunity. Same thing with maxing out our retirement accounts through work. So like a 401k, 403b, 457, those types of things. 23,500 is the maximum right now. That's a goal. You'd probably want to reach that as soon as you can. Try to max that out as much as you can. A lot of the folks that we work with are also student loan borrowers, so usually we're favoring the pre-tax bucket to save on taxes today and make our income look lower for a student loan payment. But again, these doors, they close every year where you have the maximum that you can put in this year. And if you don't max it out, you can't go back and fill these up later. Well, technically you can, but not exactly. So what I mean by that is if you're 50 or older, there are what's called catch-up contributions that you can make. So you can make extra contributions into your employer-based plans, into your traditional or Roth IRA. So that's a benefit. It's not double. It's definitely not doubling up on what you can contribute, but you can do catch-up contributions if you're 50 and older to put a little bit more in if you are in the word sense trying to catch up on what you didn't contribute in the past. But it's not as big as the full bucket, of course. Make sure we're getting the employer match. That's another little tip here. If you are someone who's trying to get organized with their budget and it's hard to save right now, it still makes sense to try your hardest to contribute to your employer plan if your employer has some kind of match. And that means if you contribute X percent, so let's say it's 5%, your employer contributes 5%, or maybe it's 4% or something. But at any rate, we're having our employer contribute to our employer-based plan. Can't talk right now. Our employer-based plan for free because we're contributing. So it's 100% return on our money right there. We want to take advantage of that as much as possible, and that's another way that we can maximize these doors while they're open, saving as much as we possibly can. So that's number 4. Let's pivot a little bit into kind of what our mindset is around retirement. So, because retirement is more than just money. So number 5 here, what would you do with your time? So this is something to think about. It is a complete identity shift when it comes to retiring. If you're fully retiring, there's, sometimes a purpose gap that no one talks about where when you're going to work, you have somewhere to be every day. You have people who expect you to be there or expect you to return on, projects and meet deadlines and, see patients. And there's that expectation every day. When you go to retire, you don't have those expectations anymore, those external or internal expectations anymore. You're essentially waking up on a Saturday every day in retirement. And that sounds amazing right at first, right? So, to me, that sounds great right now. But I know over time, knowing me, I would miss that sense of purpose or that sense of doing something productive with my time, working towards something, having goals that I'm working towards. It is a complete identity shift. So what's interesting about my father-in-law, who just is about to retire, he, for his whole career, has treated summer as if he was retired. So he's a school teacher. He gets the summers off, usually sometime end of May, starts back up sometime beginning of August. So he usually has June and July completely off from work. Ideal, dreamy, right? I know, sounds great. And that he really did take advantage of those 2 months. He counted down to the days until those 2 months got here every year. And he made a list of projects that he would do with his time over the course of those 2 months. So he was a very organized person about his time off. And what's funny And I think very fitting for his personality is he has some of those lists as well for when he's retiring. So what kind of right now, it doesn't feel real to him that he's about to retire and walk away from his job because he always gets the summers off. So in his mind, he's got his list of summer stuff to do, and he's going to go through that list as normal, June and July, get those things done that he wants to get done over the summer. And then I think what he's going to do and what he's talked a lot about is maybe looking at a fun job. And so this is something he's already thinking about, but maybe, something in sports related, something sports related. So working at maybe the golf course in his community, or working for a local football team, high school or college or something, like doing the poles, like between the yard lines. That was an idea that he had. So he's got some ideas on what he's going to do with his time. A lot of people actually don't do this. They don't think about exactly what they're going to be doing with their time. They think that they'll, figure it out when they get there. And yeah, you will certainly fill up your days with some things. But you might find yourself kind of losing that sense of purpose if you're not as organized and if you don't have, an idea of what you might throw yourself into next, or what you might kind of give yourself to. Because I think we all, to an extent, we need to have some kind of purpose day to day. Like, I feel like I need to be working towards something at all times. Like, I have goals personally, professionally, and that's what makes me kind of take baby steps every day towards those things. So same thing in retirement. You're going to want to have goals and things that you're working towards in retirement. Maybe it's not professional anymore. Maybe it's more personal. Maybe it's more, we're donating our time or doing more for charity, something like that, passion projects. So those are just the things that you want to think about. All right. Number 6 on my list is running a test retirement. Ooh, I love these things. I love tests. I love proposed budgets. I love kind of modeling what is about to come. Big changes in our life. I like to model that out to know, like, how is that going to feel? So what I mean by running a test retirement is I want you to practice living on a retirement budget for a month. So this also means that you've got to do some of these steps before that I've talked about. Maybe this isn't something you do right now, something you work up to over the next little bit. But definitely, before you go to retire, you'd want to test out that retirement budget. Is it doable? Take a sabbatical, take a mini retirement retreat, see how it feels both financially and emotionally. So I do this a lot when big changes happen in somebody's cash flow with, let's say buying a house. That's one good example, or having kids because we have daycare or other expenses coming into play. I'll do a mock cash flow to get a feel for, okay, how much do you need to stay within for spending within this time frame? With this new situation happening, with these new expenses, what needs to be adjusted? And I test them on it. Can you live off of this over the next 3 months? Let me know. We'll check back in. I'm my client's accountability partner, so we talk through that. But this can be a really great test run before you actually pull the trigger. I wouldn't do this 5 months before going to retire. That might be too soon, or too close to when that retirement date's coming up, because if things are going awry, maybe we're not as prepared as we think, we don't have a lot of time to fix it before that actual retirement date gets here. So this might be something to test, in your late 30s, 40s, 50s, early 50s, depending on when you're trying to retire, to kind of try it out and then see, again, kind of recalibrate. Are we on track? Do we know what our numbers need to be? Do we know what our timeline is? Take an inventory of our accounts. Are we putting money towards the right accounts to get us there? Have we thought about what we're going to do with our time? Practice that. What are we going to do with our time? How are you feeling throughout that test retirement phase? So I think that's a really great exercise to try out. All right. The next 2 to close out our 8 tips here. 7 is, I don't want you to underestimate healthcare. Healthcare can get very expensive, especially as we're aging and aging gracefully. We're getting older, and that means takes a lot of healthcare to keep us healthy and operating, as efficiently as we can. Also, some just factual things. So, Medicare is, think about that as your retirement health care plan. Medicare doesn't start until 65. So, if you're someone who wants to retire at 55 or 56 or 60, you are not going to be able to opt into Medicare until age 65. So, what are you going to do for healthcare coverage between that window of time? That's something to definitely be aware of if you're somebody who's looking to retire early, because you're going to need healthcare. So there's some bridge options that you can consider. Cobra, to an extent. Cobra is something you could utilize for a period of time until maybe Medicare kicks in or until it expires. There's also the open market, the ACA open market healthcare system. That's what I'm on, actually, for me and my family. You can use HSA money, maybe to pay out of pocket for healthcare expenses. HSAs are a beautiful tool. We had an episode on the Financially Free Friday episode or podcast of the Student Loan Planner podcast a couple weeks ago talking about HSAs. Go back and take a listen to that if you missed it. But HSAs could be a great thing to lean on during kind of this bridge period between early retirement and whenever Medicare kicks in for your healthcare needs. And when you're getting older too, healthcare typically doesn't get cheaper. You may be on more prescriptions or more doctor visits in general, those types of things. So that's just the cautionary thing I want to mention is don't underestimate healthcare. In our financial planning software that we use with clients, we do factor in estimates for healthcare, and we try to be as conservative as possible too, to make sure that we're factoring in that expense is going to be around when you retire through when you pass away, right? That's going to be something that's a constant expense. All right. And to wrap things up, step 8 here is to start early and revisit your plan often. I do think there are certain aspects to retirement planning that can be a set it and forget it type of thing, like setting up auto contributions to your retirement accounts or your investment accounts can be kind of a set it and forget it type of thing where you don't have to actively think about saving each and every month. It's a great thing for saving your mental energy and for just keeping you consistent with your plan. But retirement itself, like reviewing your retirement probability of success, is not necessarily a set it and forget it kind of thing, where that is something you'd want to revisit every so often to make sure we're kind of recalibrating, we're making sure that you're still on track, that you're feeling good, and our probability of success is looking good, looking positive, right? Out of those thousands of scenarios, are we still passing? C's get degrees, right? So even 70% success rate, that's decent. We want to get closer to 80, 85%. That would be ideal. But review, check that often. And just because you're a high income earner, so my physicians, my dentists, my other high income earners who might be listening, that doesn't mean that you can't fall behind too, especially if you're someone who is not paying attention to retirement planning now. I see this a lot. It's math. If we're making a great income, but we're spending a lot of that great income, and we keep thinking we'll save later, we'll save later, we'll save later. Well, you're missing out on time, and you're living a standard of living right now, a standard of living with your expenses that you may not be able to maintain in your retirement years if you don't start saving soon for that. Because time value of money, compound interest, like that is such a big benefit to you starting earlier with saving, even if it's a smaller amount that we're saving. That's still more significant than saving barely anything at all or nothing at all. That's the worst. But, if we're not looking at these numbers earlier, you might grow into kind of that keeping up with the Joneses thought process, that mentality where we're growing into the income that we're making and we're not making room for savings. So at some point, there's going to be some kind of painful adjustment where we're either going to painfully have to adjust to start saving aggressively at some point, the closer we get to retirement, to make sure we're on track, or we're going to have to work longer, right? Or we're going to have to spend and have a standard of living that's drastically different in retirement than you were living your working career. So that's just a cautionary thing. Like, just because you're making great income doesn't mean that retirement's in the bag. That's not necessarily the case, especially if you're spending all of that income, because we're not planning for that income in retirement right now. So in closing, those 8 steps, I'll just kind of recap them real quick. Get clear on your timeline. Number 2, know your numbers. Number 3, inventory your accounts. Where's everything at? Number 4, max out the right doors while they're still open. Number 5, figure out what you're going to do with your time in retirement. What does retirement look like to you? Number 6, run a test retirement scenario. Number 7, don't underestimate healthcare. That can be a hole in our financial plan if we're underestimating the healthcare expenses. And number 8, start early and revisit your plan often. So if you haven't yet, review your accounts, start thinking through your numbers, talk with your planner, find a planner if you don't have one. That was the question that my father-in-law asked me. So I met him, in 2017 when I first started dating my husband, and he knew I was a financial planner, at the time. And he asked me, he said, "Hey, I've been thinking about retirement. I know it's coming up. I've worked 30 something years in this profession so far. What do I need to do?" And I told him, go find a financial planner, a fiduciary financial planner who can help you model this out and be your right-hand man getting you across the finish line here. And that's exactly what he did. And I'm so happy he did. I'm so happy that he trusts his advisor. He calls her for everything, I feel like, everything financially related. They run it by her before they do big things or they change things in their plan. And what's so great about that is they just feel more and more confident with their decisions. Not that they couldn't make these decisions on their own, like they absolutely could, but it's always just really great to have somebody else to run it by, run the numbers with, to be like a voice of reason if needed, another opinion in the room that does this every day, that runs these numbers every day to make sure that you're feeling confident in what you want to do. So I'm so happy that they did that back then, and now we're living it in the real moment. We're, all kind of adapting to what that's going to look like here coming up. And thank you for listening. I appreciate you. And thanks for coming over to the Financially Free Era podcast. I know it's a little switch from the Student Loan Planner podcast, but I'm looking forward to the conversations that we're going to have in future episodes. And I hope you have a lovely weekend coming up, and I will catch you on the next one.
Are you ready to unlock financial freedom faster with SLP Wealth? Get high-quality, affordable, student loan-aware financial planning and get the best deal for it anywhere that you're going to find working with your own dedicated SLP Wealth financial planner that is able to give you the best integrated advice across financial planning, investments, and tax, along with all the student loan hacks that you need and that impact all other areas of your financial planning. The deal you're going to find here is special just for podcast listeners. If you go to promo.slpwealth.com, you can sign up with a great discount off your first month. That's promo.slpwealth.com.